December 13th, 2021. The air in Bridgeport, Connecticut is a sharp, biting cold. It is the kind of winter morning where the sky is a flat, bruised gray. For most, it is just another Monday. But for Chantel Smith, the world has gone unnervingly quiet. Her daughter, Lauren Smith Fields, is 23 years old. She is vibrant. She is a social media butterfly. She is a fitness enthusiast who shares her life in real time. Usually, Lauren's phone is an extension of her hand, a text, a TikTok, a FaceTime call to her mother. It is the steady heartbeat of their relationship. But today, the heart has stopped. Chantel looks at her phone. No good morning text, no missed calls. She checks Lauren's Instagram, no new stories. There is a specific kind of silence that a mother recognizes, a heavy, suffocating weight that sits in the pit of the stomach. It is the mother's intuition, a silent alarm that screams before the first tear even falls. Chantel decides she cannot wait. She gets into her car. She drives toward 33 Plymouth Street. As she pulls up to the apartment building, everything looks normal. The brick facade is indifferent. The windows are dark. Chantel walks up the stairs, her boots echoing against the floor. She reaches Lauren's door. She knocks. No one answers. She knocks again. Louder this time. The silence from inside the apartment feels like a physical wall. She tries the handle. It's locked. And then her eyes catch a small, white, fluttering object taped to the wood. It is a scrap of paper, a note. In a true crime story, we expect the police to be the ones to deliver the news. We expect a knock at the door, 2 officers in uniform, and a heavy-hearted apology. But in Bridgeport, the system didn't knock. It just left a message. The note was from the landlord. It had a phone number scrawled on it. No context, no urgent, just a number and a name. Detective Kevin McKeon. Chantel's hands are shaking as she dials. The wind whistles through the hallway of the apartment building. The phone rings once, twice. When the detective answers, he doesn't ask who she is. He doesn't offer a prayer. He simply tells her that her daughter is dead. He tells her that Lauren was found unresponsive that morning. He tells her she is already in a body bag. Just like that, the vibrant life of a 23-year-old student is reduced to a cold voice on the other end of a phone line and a piece of paper taped to a door. There was no chaplain. There was no compassion. There was only the note. This is the story of a girl who lived her life in the light, a man who met her in the digital shadows, and a police department that looked at a crime scene and saw nothing at all. Before we step inside that apartment, before we look at what the police chose to ignore, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Every time you share a story like Lauren's, you are refusing to let the silence win. You are making sure the system can't just walk away and leave a note. To understand the mystery, we have to go back to the night before, December 12th, 2021. Lauren was excited. She had a date. She had matched on Bumble with a 37-year-old man named Matthew Pantaleo. He was older, seemingly established. To Lauren, he was a match. To the investigators, he would soon become a nice guy. According to Pantaleo's statement, the night was unremarkable. They met at Lauren's apartment. They drank tequila. They watched a movie. He claims that at one point, Lauren went into the bathroom for a long time and returned looking ill. He says they eventually fell asleep on her bed. But the morning tells a different story. At 6:35 a.m., Pantaleo calls 911. He tells the dispatcher that he woke up and found Lauren unresponsive. He says there is blood coming from her right nostril. He sounds calm. Too calm, some might say. When the paramedics arrive, they find Lauren's body. She is already cold. The life has been gone for hours. The apartment, however, is full of questions. There is a plate of food. There are drinks. There is the lingering scent of a night that ended in a nightmare. And here is where the secret begins to fester. Detective McKeon arrives. He speaks to Pantaleo. He doesn't put him in handcuffs. He doesn't take him to the station for a formal interrogation. He doesn't even seize the man's phone. Instead, he listens. He looks at the nice guy in front of him and makes a decision that will haunt the Smithfields family forever. He decides that this isn't a crime scene. He decides it's an accident. When Lauren's brothers, Lakeem and Tydort, finally speak to the detective later that day, they ask the question any grieving sibling would ask: who was she with? Where is he? The detective's response was a chilling foreshadowing of the battle to come. He told them not to worry about the man. He told them he was a nice guy. He told them there was no reason to suspect him of anything. Imagine finding your sister dead, her blood on the sheets, her life gone, and being told by the person in charge of justice that the only witness is just a nice guy. The detectives didn't bag the evidence. They didn't cordon off the room. They didn't search the trash. They simply took Lauren's body, left a note for her mother, and walked away. They left the apartment exactly as it was, a tomb filled with secrets that were waiting for someone, anyone, to find them. The silence on Plymouth Street wasn't just in the hallway. It was inside the precinct. It was a silence born of a snap judgment. A judgment that said a young Black woman's death wasn't worth the paperwork of a full investigation. But Lauren's family was about to prove them wrong. Because when the police walked out, the family walked in. And what they found in the shadows of that apartment would change the state of Connecticut forever. This is the story of Lauren Smith Fields. Lauren Smith Fields was not a ghost. She was a hurricane of ambition. She was a 23-year-old woman who lived her life in high definition. To the world looking through a phone screen, she was a glow of curated perfection. To the family who shared her blood, she was the steady, warm pulse of their lives. Born on January 23, 1998, Lauren grew up as the only girl among 4 protective brothers. In the landscape of Bridgeport, she carved out a space that was entirely her own. She wasn't just existing, she was ascending. By December 2021, she had turned her passions into a professional identity. She was a student at Norwalk Community College, but her real classroom was her apartment. Lauren was a budding tycoon in the beauty industry. Under her brand, Dual Eyebrows, she became an artisan of confidence. She spent her hours perfecting microblading and tinting. She used her own face as the ultimate testimony to her skill. Her social media wasn't a playground. It was a portfolio. Every post was a brick in the empire she was building from the ground up. The narrative the system tried to craft about Lauren was one of a party girl. They wanted to believe she slipped into a tragic mistake. But the facts of her life create a staggering dissonance with that theory. Lauren was a fitness freak. Her kitchen was a sanctuary of smoothies and vitamins. She treated her body with a reverence that most 23-year-olds haven't discovered yet. She didn't smoke. She didn't experiment with street drugs. Her brothers remember her as the one who would lecture them about their health. She lived with a vitality that seemed bulletproof. She was a traveler with a global appetite. Her digital footprint was a mosaic of turquoise waters and ancient cobblestones. She walked the streets of Rome. She tanned on the shores of Puerto Rico. She lived in a constant state of next. By that cold December, her eyes were fixed on the horizon of Greece. It was for her upcoming 24th birthday. She had the flight searched. She had the outfits picked out. Does this sound like a woman who would make a fatal choice on a random Sunday morning? The math does not add up. Beyond the business and the gym, Lauren was the glue. She was the daughter who called her mother, Chantel, every single day. She didn't do it out of obligation. She did it out of a deep, tethered love. She was the sister who checked in on her brothers' lives. She was the one who held the map for the family's future. In her apartment on Plymouth Street, she created a sanctuary. It was a place of soft lighting and organized makeup kits. It was filled with the hum of a ring light that stayed on late into the night. It was a room where she felt safe to invite the world in, one follower at a time. But the digital world is a double-edged sword. It offers connection, but it also hides shadows. On December 8th, 2021, that connection came in the form of a match on Bumble. Lauren was navigating the modern dating scene with caution. She saw a man who seemed established, a 37-year-old design engineer. She saw a mutual friend on Instagram. She saw a green light. She didn't know she was inviting a ghost into her sanctuary. She didn't know the life she documented so carefully was about to be reduced to a clinical report. A document that would try to overwrite her smoothies with fentanyl. A report that would try to replace her ambition with accidental intoxication. The contrast is the secret. The system wanted to see a statistic. Her family wanted the world to see the girl who lit up every room. While the police were busy looking at the nice guy in the living room, they failed to look at the woman in the photos. They ignored the vitamins on the counter. They ignored the college books on the desk. They saw a Black woman in a tragedy and decided her story was already over. But Lauren's digital ghost was just getting started. The clock on the wall of apartment 306 ticked through the silence of a Saturday night. It was December 11th, 2021. Outside, the world was preparing for the holidays. Inside, Lauren was hosting a first date. The man was Matthew LaFountain. He was 37, he was a design engineer, he was the match from the digital world who had finally stepped into her physical one. According to the statement he gave to the police, the date started with a strange technicality. He claimed that when he arrived at 33 Plymouth Street, he called Lauren's phone multiple times. He told investigators she didn't pick up. He said he was about leaving when she called him back and said she didn't pick because she was doing her makeup. She let him in. He told the detectives the evening was simple. They drank tequila. They watched a movie. But then his narrative took a sharp, clinical turn. He claimed that at one point, Lauren went into the bathroom for 15 minutes. When she returned, he said she looked ill. He described her as stumbling, her eyes unfocused. He said he didn't want to be rude, so he didn't ask her if she needed a doctor. He didn't call her mother. He simply watched her, then claimed they eventually fell asleep on her bed. But the sun rose on a different reality. At 6:35 a.m. on Sunday, December 12th, the quiet was broken by a 911 call. LaFountain's voice was on the line. He told the dispatcher he had just woken up. He said Lauren was unresponsive. He noted that blood was coming from her right nostril. When the paramedics arrived at 6:49 a.m., they found a 23-year-old woman who was already cold. The life had drained out of the room hours before the call was made. The vibrant girl who lived in the light of a ring light was now a still figure in a dark room. And this is where the nice guy shield was forged. Detective Kevin McKeon arrived at the scene. He looked at the apartment. He saw the tequila. He saw the man who had called for help. In a standard death investigation, every person in the room is a person of interest. You bag their clothes, you check for DNA under the victim's fingernails, you seize their phone to check the digital breadcrumbs of the night. But McKeon didn't do any of that. He spoke to LaFountain. He listened to the story of the illness and the movie. He looked at the professional older man and made a snap judgment. He didn't see a suspect. He saw a witness who was visibly upset. While Lauren's body was being zipped into a bag, the only witness to her final breaths was being told he was free to go. No handcuffs, no station house interrogation, no toxicology screen for the man who was the last person to see her alive. Later that day, Lauren's brothers, Lakeem and Tydert, finally reached the detective. They were drowning in a sea of why. They wanted to know about the man. They wanted to know why he wasn't in custody. McKeon's response was a knife to the heart of their grief. He told them the man was a nice guy. He told them there was no reason to suspect him of any foul play. He treated the brothers' questions like a nuisance. He treated Lauren's death like a foregone conclusion. The detectives didn't cordon off the room. They didn't search the trash. They didn't look for the secret that was hidden in plain sight. They took Lauren's ID and her passport. They left a note for her mother. And then they walked away. They left the apartment exactly as it was, a tomb filled with evidence that was waiting for someone to care. They assumed that because Lauren was a young Black woman and her date was a nice professional man, the story was over. But the silence in the precinct was about to be met with a scream from the family. The detectives thought they had closed a file. In reality, they had just left the door open for a mother and her sons to become the investigators the city refused to provide. The keys felt heavy in Chantel's hand. The police had officially cleared the scene. They had walked away from apartment 306, leaving the door locked and the secrets inside. To the detectives, the work was done. To the family, the investigation had not even begun. When Lauren's brothers, Lakeem and Tydert, pushed open the door, they expected a space that had been scrubbed by forensics. They expected to see the yellow tape of a professional search. They expected a room that had been picked apart by experts looking for the truth of why a 23-year-old was dead. Instead, they stepped into a time capsule of neglect. The apartment was exactly as it had been left on the morning of December 12th. The air was stale. The bed where Lauren had taken her last breath was unmade. The sheets were still there, stained with the blood that had escaped her nose as her heart stopped. The brothers didn't have badges. They didn't have forensic kits. They only had their eyes and an agonizing sense of duty. Tydert walked toward the bathroom. He looked at the trash can, the same one the detectives had stood next to just hours before. He didn't have to dig deep. Sitting right on top was a used condom. The blood in his veins turned to ice. The detective, McKeon, had told the family that the nice guy date claimed they hadn't had sex. He had used that detail to paint a picture of a platonic, respectful evening. Yet here was the physical proof of a lie. The police hadn't even looked in the bin. They hadn't bagged the DNA. They had left the most basic biological evidence of the night to be thrown out with the Tuesday morning garbage. Lakeem moved toward the kitchen. On the floor, near the edge of the counter, something caught the light. It was a small, unidentified blue pill. It sat there like a silent confession. Lauren was a woman who guarded her body like a temple. She didn't have a medicine cabinet full of maybes. She didn't experiment. Seeing a foreign chemical in her sanctuary was a scream for help that the police had simply ignored. The detectives hadn't crawled on the floor. They hadn't checked the corners. They had looked at the surface and decided there was nothing to see. The brothers kept looking. They found a plate of food, half-eaten. They found the lube container. Every item they touched was a piece of a puzzle that the professionals had refused to solve. The horror began to set in. The realization that the people paid to protect Lauren's memory had treated her home like a nuisance. They hadn't processed the scene. They had merely vacated it. Chantel stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the evidence of a life interrupted and a crime ignored. She realized then that if the truth was going to come out, it wouldn't be through a precinct. It would be through her. "They didn't do anything," Tydert whispered, looking at the blood on the bed.
Family says they provided evidence they'd collected to crime scene investigators who arrived for the first time that day, included a bloody sheet and a pill.
And 2 cups of like drinks or whatever next to a bottle. They didn't take none of that. We seen a condom, we seen lube, other stuff in there, and they didn't take.
The secret was no longer just about what happened on the date. The secret was the systemic failure unfolding in real time. The police had handed the family the keys to a crime scene and told them to move on. They had left the DNA, the pills, and the lies behind a locked door, hoping they would be swept away. But the Smithfields family didn't sweep. They documented, they took photos, they gathered the items the nice guy shield had protected. They became the investigators Lauren deserved, because in Bridgeport, the only thing more dangerous than the night before was the indifference of the morning after. Wait was the only thing the Smithfields family could do. For 6 weeks, the apartment sat as a silent witness while the wheels of bureaucracy turned. The digital world was beginning to stir. but the official word remained locked behind the doors of the chief medical examiner's office. Then, on January 24th, 2022, the silence was broken by a document that felt more like a betrayal than a discovery. The cause of death was typed in cold black ink: acute intoxication due to the combined effects of fentanyl, promethazine, hydroxyzine, and alcohol. The ruling? Accidental. To the state, Lauren was just another statistic in an opioid crisis. To the detectives, it was the "I told you so" they had been waiting for. They had their answer. They had their nice guy date who was just a bystander to a tragic mistake. But the math of Lauren's life didn't match the chemistry in her blood. How does a woman who treats her body like a temple end up with a lethal cocktail of street drugs and prescription sedatives in her system? Lauren was the girl who lectured her brothers about their diet. She was the one who meticulously tracked her workouts. She didn't use drugs. She didn't even keep a medicine cabinet full of over-the-counter pills. Yet, the report claimed she had ingested fentanyl, a synthetic killer 50 times stronger than heroin, along with promethazine and hydroxyzine, drugs used to treat everything from nausea to anxiety. The family stared at the report in disbelief. If Lauren didn't have these drugs in her home, and she never left her apartment that night, then the substances had to have walked through the door with someone else. The secret wasn't just in the chemicals, it was in the source. Why was the nice guy never drug tested on the morning of December 12th? Why were his clothes not taken for analysis? The police had allowed the only living witness to go home, effectively erasing any chance to see if the cocktail in Lauren's system matched the one in his. The most haunting question revolved around the small blue pill the brothers had found on the floor. The police had ignored it. They hadn't bagged it during their initial sweep. When the toxicology report came back with a mix of sedatives, the family pointed back to that discarded pill. It was a physical link that the detectives had stepped over. The suspense grew. The family's attorney, Darnell Crosland, began to scream into the void of the legal system. He pointed out the obvious. If a woman dies from a drug she doesn't use, in the presence of a man she barely knows, you don't call it an accident. You call it a crime scene. The accidental ruling was supposed to be the end of the story. The Bridgeport Police Department wanted the family to go away. They wanted the digital noise to stop. But the report backfired. Instead of closing the case, it ignited a fire. It proved that Lauren hadn't just died. She'd been poisoned by a cocktail she never would have mixed herself. The secret was now a public outcry. The image of the nice guy was no longer a shield. It was a target. The world started asking why a design engineer was allowed to walk away from a room filled with lethal narcotics while a 23-year-old was being buried. The system called it an accident. The family called it a cover-up. And as the toxicology report circulated through the internet, the quiet city of Bridgeport was about to learn that you can't label a tragedy accidental when the evidence was left in the trash. The walls of the Bridgeport Police Department were thick, but they were not thick enough to stop the internet. By January 2022, the grief of the Smithfields family had transformed. It was no longer a private tragedy. It was a digital fire. Chantel and her sons took their pain to the only place that would listen. They went to TikTok. They posted Lauren's face. They showed the world the woman behind the accidental label. They showed her track medals. They showed her graduation photos. The hashtag Justice for Lauren Smith Fields began to move like a tidal wave. It wasn't just a local story anymore. It was a global interrogation. Millions of people watched the clips of Lauren dancing. They compared her vibrant life to the cold, dismissive note left on her door. The contrast was too sharp. The world began to ask the same questions the detectives had ignored. The internet did what the police refused to do. It investigated. People began to look into the nice guy shield. They looked into the history of the Bridgeport precinct. Then the celebrities joined the chorus. Cardi B took to her platform. She didn't just post a prayer, she posted a demand. She asked why a 23-year-old was dead and her date was sleeping in his own bed. She asked why the system looked at a black woman and saw a party girl instead of a victim. The pressure was no longer a whisper. It was a roar. On January 30th, 2022, the city of Bridgeport finally buckled. The mayor, Joe Ganim, stepped in front of the cameras. He didn't offer excuses this time. He announced that the two lead detectives, McKeon and Lanos, were being placed on administrative leave. The nice guy narrative was finally cracking. The detectives weren't suspended because of the evidence. They were suspended because the world wouldn't stop watching. But the Smithfields family wanted more than just a suspension. They wanted a legacy that would protect the next daughter. They took their fight to the Connecticut state capitol. They stood before lawmakers. They told the story of the note on the door. They told the story of the used condom in the trash. They forced the state to look at the reality of how they treated families in their darkest hours. The result was Senate Bill 5. It is known now as Lauren's Law. The law is simple. It is human. It mandates that police must notify the next of kin within 24 hours of a person's death. No more notes taped to wood. No more mothers finding out their children are in a morgue through a landlord. It was a victory, but it was a bitter one. Lauren had to die in silence for the law to find its voice. As the snow melted in 2022, the federal government stepped in. The DEA launched an investigation into the drugs found in Lauren's system. They wanted to know where the fentanyl came from. They wanted the answers the local police had walked away from. The secret was out. The Bridgeport Police Department hadn't just made a mistake. They had committed a systemic failure. They had allowed a potential crime scene to be contaminated by their own bias. The digital uprising proved one thing. In the modern world, your attention is a weapon. The Smithfields family used that weapon to tear down the nice guy shield. They proved that when the system tries to erase you, the internet can make you immortal. Lauren was no longer just a girl in a ring light. She was a movement, and the silence on Plymouth Street was finally being met with the sound of justice. The sirens have long since faded from Plymouth Street. It is now 2026. In the quiet of a Bridgeport evening, the brick building at number 33 looks like any other. But for those who know the secret, the air there still feels heavy. The legal battle has moved from the streets to the courtrooms. The Smithfields family filed a massive civil lawsuit against the city of Bridgeport. They are suing for the deprivation of rights. They are suing for the incompetence that left a used condom in a trash can and a mother in the dark. But the nice guy at the center of the night remains a free man. No criminal charges were ever filed against the date. The system still clings to that word. Accidental. It is a word that acts as a dead end. It is a word that stops the handcuffs from clicking. It is a word that allows a 37-year-old man to move on, while a 23-year-old stays frozen in a digital time capsule. Lauren's social media pages are still there. They are digital monuments. If you scroll through her Instagram, you see the ring light. You see the smile. You see the dual eyebrows posts that promised a future of beauty and growth. She is a digital ghost that refuses to vanish. Every time a young woman in Connecticut matches with a stranger on an app, Lauren is there. She is the reason they send their live location to their best friend. She is the reason they check the news before they knock on a door. She is the shadow that reminds us that nice is not a background check. The lesson Lauren leaves behind is a chilling one. Your life is your evidence. In a world that might try to label you as a runaway or a statistic, you must leave a trail. You must document your existence. You must live so loudly that the system cannot ignore your silence. The final secret of Plymouth Street isn't about what happened in the bathroom or who brought the tequila. The secret is that the system only works for those it chooses to see. Lauren was a track star. She was a student. She was a daughter who called her mom every day. But to the detectives, she was just a girl in a body bag. They didn't see the college books. They didn't see the vitamins. They only saw a reason to go home early. But they forgot one thing. They forgot that a mother's love is a forensic force. They forgot that brothers don't need a badge to find a lie. As we close this chapter, look at the face of Lauren Smithfields one more time. Remember the girl in the ring light. Remember the note on the door. And remember that some accidents are just questions that nobody wanted to answer. The silence on Plymouth Street has been broken. But the echo will last forever.